On the morning of the 27th of August, 1883, a sound left a small uninhabited island in the Sunda Strait. 4 hours later, it was still traveling. Almost 3,000 miles away, in the middle of the Indian Ocean, the chief of police on Rodriguez Island wrote in his log that he could hear the distant roar of heavy guns. There was no ship, there was no battle. It was an island tearing itself apart, and it remains the loudest sound human beings have ever recorded. The Sunda Strait is the narrow channel between Java and Sumatra. It sits on a volcanic arc, where the Australian plate grinds beneath the Sunda plate at roughly 60 millimeters a year. Krakatoa stood in the middle of that channel. The island already had a violent past. An older, larger volcano collapsed here long before written history, leaving a caldera 7 kilometers across. Javanese court literature has been read as dating that to the year 416, but there is no geological evidence for it. The old caldera is real. The date is not. By 1883, 3 cones had grown out of that ruin and fused into one island roughly 9 kilometers long. Rakata in the south, 813 meters high. Danan in the middle. Perboewatan in the north, low and flat. Nobody lived there. On the 20th of May, 1883, Perboewatan began to vent steam. Ash rose about 6 kilometers. In Batavia, the colonial capital 160 kilometers away, the explosions rattled windows and doors. At first it was a spectacle. An excursion party landed 6 days later and found the island under fine white dust, with a new crater 900 meters wide and an explosion every 5 to 10 minutes. Along the coasts of Java and Sumatra, people gathered to watch. Through June and July the eruption ate the island. The summit of Perboewatan was blown away. New vents opened. In early August, a Dutch engineer, Captain Ferzenaar, counted 3 major ash columns and steam from at least 11 other vents, found every plant dead, and advised that nobody should land there again. He was the last person to survey Krakatoa. At around 1 o'clock on the afternoon of Sunday the 26th of August, the eruption entered its final phase. By 2, a black column stood 27 kilometers above the strait. By 5, the explosions could be heard across the whole of Java. Ships nearby reported hot pumice, some pieces the size of a fist, falling onto their decks. The next morning, the island destroyed itself in 4 enormous explosions. The first came at 5:30, the second at 6:44, the third, at 2 minutes past 10, was the largest. The fourth, at 21 minutes to 11, tore away half of Rakata as the island collapsed into the emptied chamber beneath it. The third explosion was heard 3,000 kilometers away in Perth and 4,800 kilometers away on Rodriguez. By one estimate, it was audible across a 13th of the surface of the Earth. And here is the strangest detail. Close to the volcano, the largest blasts were reported as muffled or not heard at all. The energy was thrown upward into the stratosphere and bent away over the heads of the people nearest to it. The instrument that caught the pressure wave was not a scientific one. It was the gauge on a gasometer at the Batavia gasworks, 100 miles away. It spiked past 2.5 inches of mercury and went off the scale. Converted, that is on the order of 170 to 180 decibels. Human pain begins at about 134. Every recording barograph on the planet registered that wave, some logging it 7 times over 5 days as it traveled to the far side of the world and back. But it was not the sound that killed people. It was the water. The collapse drove waves across the strait, 30 to 40 meters high and about 46 meters at Merak. The towns of Anjar and Telok Betong were erased. Passengers aboard the ship Laudest watched the sea consume Telok Betong in a single sweeping motion. 165 coastal villages were destroyed. On Sebesi Island, 3,000 people. No survivors. The Dutch gunboat Barrow was torn from her moorings and carried 2 to 3 kilometers inland, up a river valley and left there, 10 meters above the sea, with all 28 of her crew dead. Then there was the fire. Pyroclastic flows traveled more than 40 kilometers across open water, riding on a cushion of their own superheated steam, and came ashore in southern Sumatra still hot enough to kill. Around noon, burning ash fell on the village of Kenembang. Roughly 1,000 died there. Along that coast, some 2,000 bodies were found scorched rather than drowned. Darkness closed over the strait at 11 in the morning and did not lift for more than a day. Ash fell across 800,000 square kilometers. The official Dutch count of the dead was 36,417. But communications were cut, whole coastal populations had been swept out to sea, and remote settlements were never surveyed. That number is a floor, not a total. When the ash cleared, 2/3 of the islet was simply gone. Danan and Perboewatan had vanished. Rakata had been sliced in half, leaving a sheer cliff, and where the rest had stood there was now open water hundreds of meters deep. Then the sky changed everywhere. Fine ash and sulfur circled the equator in 13 days. The sun turned blue and green because particles about a micron across scatter red light and let the rest through. 3 months later, sunsets over the northeastern United States were so violently red that fire brigades turned out in New York and New Haven to put out a fire that was not there. Observers tracking that drifting haze around the world called it the equatorial smoke stream. Today we call it the jet stream. It was found because of Krakatoa. Global temperatures fell. Estimates range from about 0.3 of a degree to more than 1 degree Celsius. They did not return to normal until 1888. For 44 years, the sea over the caldera was quiet. Then, in December 1927, the water began to boil. A new cone was growing on the same line where Danan and Perboewatan had stood. Waves destroyed it, and it rebuilt itself again and again, until in August 1930 it held. The Indonesians named it Anak Krakatau, the child of Krakatoa. It grew about 7 to 9 meters a year. On the 22nd of December 2018, during an eruption, the whole southwestern flank of that child slid into the sea. There was no earthquake, so there was no warning. The tsunami killed 437 people. The volcano lost 2/3 of its height in an afternoon, dropping from 338 meters to about 110. 6 years earlier, a team of geologists had published a paper modeling exactly that collapse on exactly that flank. Anak Krakatau is growing again. It is a little over 150 meters now, rising out of a hole in the seafloor left by the loudest thing anyone has ever heard.